Little Jasmine was playing football with her friends when they stopped because someone had to go pee.
Yeah, I gotta go too.
They all went to the woods, and Jasmine's jaw dropped upon seeing them.
What in the world? Why are they all peeing standing up like that?
Jasmine is the youngest child and only girl in an all-boy family. Her mother passed away when she was born, so she grew up with her father and 3 brothers. Her dad is a successful businessman who can ensure a happy life for his 3 sons, but struggles with Jasmine because he's only used to raising boys. Although he tried his best to raise a daughter, Jasmine became more like a 4th son. She has short hair, dresses like them, and plays her brother's games. She even tends to skip showers for days at a time. Her bedroom is messy and decorated with boy stuff. Her brothers even gave her a boy's name. One day while playing, her eldest brother, Gary, called over his younger siblings. Roll call! Like soldiers, the 3 younger siblings lined up from tallest to shortest, proclaiming their names loud and proud. Gary, Aaron, Nick.
Jasmine?
Her brothers looked at her, frowning disapprovingly. Then Gary had an idea. Nah, that doesn't sound right. How would you like a new name?
A new name?
Not a real new name, just a nickname. Something cool we can call you. How about that?
Sure.
How about we call her Gucci? Gucci, like the luxury brand?
Yeah, it sounds cool.
So, how about that, Jasmine? You like Gucci? Jasmine nodded, and from that day forward, everyone called her Gucci. She learned to like it more than her real name, and as she grew up, she just assumed she was a boy. That is, until the incident happened today. Feeling absolutely bamboozled, Jasmine dashed home to tell her dad what she saw.
Dad, am I a different type of boy?
No, you're a girl, Jasmine.
A girl? Does it matter?
Not really.
Okay, cool. That's all I need to know.
After that, Jasmine still dressed up and played boys' games until a shocking event happened when she turned 12. One day at school, Jasmine suddenly felt very tired and her stomach hurt.
Can I use the restroom, please?
Yes, is everything okay?
Yeah,
But the moment she stood up, the boy sitting next to her started yelling to the rest of their classmates.
Gucci, there's something on your pants!
Jasmine looked down and her face started burning bright red. She was frozen as laughter erupted from the rest of the classroom. Unable to take another second of it, she sprinted from the room and didn't look back, despite her teacher shouting her name down the hall. Jasmine couldn't understand what was happening to her and frantically searched the school for her brothers. When she did find them, they were just as puzzled as she was, trying to figure out what to do. They didn't realize they had ended up in front of the nurse's office. Once safe inside the office, Jasmine asked,
"Give it to me straight, ma'am. Am I dying?"
No.
Oh, my dog! I'm totally dying, aren't I? I got a big game coming up. I haven't even tried.
You're not dying. It's called period, honey.
Then how do I stop it from happening?
You can't. It's gonna keep happening because you're becoming a woman.
A woman? What the?
But problems still followed Jasmine even after she entered high school. And one of those problems was mean girls.
We all know you're gay, Gucci. Tell us who you have a crush on. Well, I've liked you for a long time, Tiffany. Want to go on a date? In your dreams.
Jasmine was pleased with herself as the group of girls stormed off. One day, Jasmine was walking down the stairs when she slipped, but someone caught her. She looked up at her savior to find Mike, the new student/angel who just joined her high school. This was the first time Jasmine had felt her heart beat so fast. Not counting the time she accidentally peed on her father's Persian rug when she was 4 years old.
Hey, shut your front door!
At that moment, Jaden quickly took the opportunity, pretended to fall on the 2 of them, and uttered a line that still makes him admire his own disguise skills to this day. Ouch! Ouch! My ankle! Who the fudge spilled water all over the stairs? Jasmine turned to look at the person who had just spoken. Then a hand reached out. You okay, bro? Jasmine blushed and looked up. She saw Mike offering her his hand and shyly reached for it. But suddenly, it hit her.
He called me bro!
From then on, Jasmine continuously ran into Mike in class, in the library, and found herself falling for him. But every time Jasmine greeted him, "Hey, what's up, bro?" But Jasmine didn't want him to be her bro. She wanted him to be her beau. She decided it was time to do something. Jasmine secretly put food and lollipops in Mike's locker and was caught by Tiffany.
You know that's a boy's locker, don't you? Sorry if you're disappointed it's not yours. Why don't you just quit while you're ahead, Gucci? Mike is into real girls.
I bet he doesn't even know you're supposed to be one.
As Tiffany laughed, Jasmine turned bright red with anger. Storming away, she was determined to become the kind of girly girl Mike could fall for. Jasmine thought she would have to change from the inside out, so this would be her first destination. However, out of much embarrassment, she resorted to wearing a hoodie to fully cover herself. Jasmine suddenly noticed a saleswoman following her around the store. I'm gonna need security to get over here now. This dude is sus. No, I'm just browsing. I'm trying to find a birthday gift for my, sister.
Ah, right on. We have some lacy ones, bright colors like neon green, and hot yellow that dudes really like.
Jasmine felt dizzy. Just imagining wearing any of these made her feel embarrassed.
Quickly, she thanked the saleswoman for her help and told her she'd come back, then hurried out of the store.
How is being a girl so difficult? I wish I had some girlfriends to help with this. I have no clue what I'm doing.
As soon as Jasmine got outside, she noticed Jaden checking himself out in front of a glass door. Excellent! My cover as Jaden is perfect. No one's gonna know who I really am.
Jeez, this guy again. He seemed so self-obsessed. So much more girly than I could ever be.
Jasmine then immediately came up with this brilliant idea, but Jaden had already left. The next day, Jasmine saw Jaden again, who was enthusiastically chatting with the gossip girls. Do these girls know how to get to the point? This gossip is exhausting. I just need them to say something relevant about Mike so I can get on with this investigation. When the mean girls left, Jasmine finally worked up the nerve to approach him with her proposition.
Can you help me be more like those other girls?
Like what? Chatty?
More, I don't know, feminine?
No thanks.
Oh, come on. I know you have it inside.
I don't have time for this nonsense. I have a job to do. Jaden started walking away, but Jasmine wasn't going to take no for an answer.
Please, I want to get Mike to like me, and he only likes girly girls.
Jaden realized this could be a good opportunity for him to get to Mike, instead of directly approaching him, which could easily raise suspicion, so he agreed. Together, Jaden and Jasmine found out that he seemed to be into designer stuff. He also adored Kendall Jenner very much. Looks like Mike has expensive tastes.
Money's not a problem.
Then she dragged Jaden to the mall. They bought all kinds of designer dresses, high heels, and bags, which made Jaden's jaw totally drop. Jeez, I didn't expect you to be rich.
My dad is a collector of sorts. He likes antiques and things. You know, like those fancy old Persian carpets, original artwork, porcelain vases and things. He has a good job, so I guess he can afford such an expensive hobby.
Then Jaden also taught Jasmine how to walk and behave like a girl. Jasmine struggled a lot. She was just so used to acting like a boy that acting like a girl was more foreign to her than her dad's Nordic glassware.
How come you're better at being a girl than I am?
Because I spent endless days and nights doing research on this character so I could easily master all this girly stuff. Oh, I guess it's all in my genes. And that made Jasmine fall over laughing. The following day, Jasmine came to school with her brand new look and was immediately thrust into the spotlight. However, the only ones who didn't seem to notice were Mike and Tiffany.
This plan seems like a bust.
You can't lose the race before you've even reached the starting line.
He seems to have even more faith in me than I have in myself. Gotta trust the process, I guess.
And indeed, the following days, Jaden tried his best to help Jasmine approach Mike. At lunch, when Mike passed their table, Jaden designedly dropped Jasmine's apple, which he caught just before it hit the ground. Can I sit here? After a few days, Mike fell for it hook, line, and sinker. He tracked Jasmine down at the end of the day to ask her out.
So, things didn't work out between you and Tiffany?
Psh, no. I found out all her designer clothes were knockoffs. Can you believe that? I just hate liars. Don't you?
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, is that yes to a date?
Absolutely.
Who fell for it hook, line, and sinker then? Soon enough, Jasmine and Mike were officially dating, and Jaden didn't miss this chance to follow them 24/7. Jaden always seemed to appear out of nowhere to interrupt their conversations. So, tell us a little more about yourself, Mike. Where do you live? What does your dad do for work? Well, I lost my mom when I was too young to remember her, and I've basically lived with my nanny ever since. Dad comes around sometimes, but he spends a lot of time on business trips.
That must be rough. I mean, I also lost...
Why so busy? What exactly does he do? Mike's face seemed darkened, and Jasmine couldn't help but be a bit annoyed with Jaden's constant presence.
She wasn't sure who was dating Mike anymore, but there were benefits to having Jaden around all the time. He seemed to be Jasmine's savior when it came to ordering food, as Mike had a terrifyingly strict diet and skincare routine. Is there anything quality on this menu? I can't eat any of these greasy, fried, fatty foods. No soda either. Only smoothies or sugar-free milk. I also go to the gym 4 times a week and spend the rest at a spa. You should come with me sometime.
Sure. That sounds cool.
In order to keep her girly image, Jasmine tried to delicately take a few bites of the salad and ignored her grumbling stomach. Luckily, Mike had to leave early, so once he was out of sight, Jaden slid his full plate of food over to Jasmine. Here, you could act in your natural habitat now.
Thank you so much.
As Jasmine began eagerly scarfing down his food, Jaden reached for Mike's unfinished drink and took a sip.
What the heck is this poison? I should have you know that was the only thing Mike found acceptable on the menu. A sugar-free kale smoothie.
Ick. No wonder he couldn't even finish it. Then they had a great evening talking and dining on deliciously greasy, fried, fatty foods. As they were walking back home, Jasmine twisted her ankle, still not used to wearing high heels. Without thinking, Jaden quickly piggybacked Jasmine and continued walking. Comfortable quietness fell over them. Becoming self-conscious, Jasmine broke the silence.
Am I, too heavy for you?
Actually, yeah, next time, cut down on the chicken before twisting an ankle.
How dare you?
I'm kidding. You're fine. You're not heavy at all. I mean, maybe a little.
Oh, shut up, you jerk. The two shared their cheerful laughter under the streetlights.
Meanwhile, after seeing Jasmine and Mike together, Tiffany threw a tantrum and thought to herself she wouldn't let them off that easily. One day, when Jasmine and Mike were discussing where to go out next time, Jaden immediately seized the chance. Let's go to Mike's house. Come on. Alrighty then, my house it is. Let's go. When they arrived, Jaden couldn't stop admiring the house and looked everywhere, but only God knew he was just looking for clues. Staying fully in character, Jaden touched a little bit of everything, clinging on to Mike and gushing over everything. This house is beautiful and huge. It must be awesome living basically by yourself with all this. Is your dad around by any chance? We'd love to meet him. Meanwhile, Jasmine was becoming a little uncomfortable with how obsessed with Mike Jaden seemed to be.
Is he gay? I mean, that's fine, but he could just say that.
Later, when the two of them were alone, Jasmine figured it was time to confront Jaden.
Hey, I was wondering, do you, have a crush on my boyfriend?
Jaden was dumbfounded for a second, and before he could think more about it, he slyly smiled and pressed Jasmine against the wall. What makes you think so? I'm into girls. Jasmine couldn't think straight with Jaden's face so close to hers. Want me to prove it to you? Flustered, she hurriedly pulled away, heart fluttering, blushing profusely.
I would like you to stop being a third wheel then. Thank you for helping me approach Mike and all, but now that we're dating, I would appreciate it if you could give us some space. Please.
Jaden was taken aback for a second, then calmly said, You're right. Sorry. I'll back off. Being the third wheel all this time hasn't gotten me any info on Mike's dad anyway. He really was laying low, and maybe Mike didn't even know anything about what his father was doing. The FBI might need to find another way to approach this investigation. Little did Jaden know, Jasmine had become an unexpected factor in his investigation plan.
Hey guys, I'm Vanessa, and I want to tell you about my first love. So, do you all remember your first love? Yes, right? I mean, come on. How could you ever forget that first time butterflies in the tummy feeling, hand holding, and that kiss? In the heat of first love, it's easy to believe this will last forever and be a true fairy tale. Only so many first loves lead to a messy breakups that turn into a nightmare. My first love was with a boy named Julian, but you'll have to stick around to find out if our love story was a fairy tale dream or a fairy tale doom. Julian and I started off as friends, best friends. He lived across the street from me and our families were close. We hung out all the time, so much so that our parents teased that we'd get married one day. At the time I thought, no way, but we were just kids back then. Then, when I was about 10, I started to look at him differently. He was so cute and sweet, and I thought about him all the time. He liked me too, right? I mean, he bought me my favorite candy, let me play video games with him, and stuck up for me when these boys from school teased me. And then when I was 15, Julian and I were at our favorite spot. It was a really big old tree in the middle of the park. We went there loads and would lean against the tree trunk, do our homework, listen to music with one headphone, read books, basically anything relaxing. That's when he told me the shocking news. His dad had a new job in Germany, and they were moving there. What? How could this be? I was so surprised, I started crying. I expected him to comfort me, but instead he took out a pocket knife and started to carve on the tree. When he finished, he said, "Ta-da! How does it look?" He'd carved J Heart V in it. Oh gosh, he loved me too. I felt myself turn bright red and didn't want him to see me like that. So looking downward, I went to punch his arm but punched his face by mistake. Oops. Julian held his face and yelled, "Vanessa, what was that for?" I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Julian, I feel the same, I told him. We both started laughing. Then we pinky promised each other that we would keep in touch. He took my hand and told me, "Ness, I'll come back for you, I promise." Then he leaned in and kissed me. And wow, it was truly magical. And then he left. The first few weeks without him were the hardest. I didn't really have any other friends, and I was so bored and lonely. I lived for my video calls with Julian. They were the only thing keeping me going. Telling him stuff that happened at school, such as how my math teacher wore the same hideous floral dress all week, made me feel like he was still there. Things went on like that for a while. It slowly became a habit for us to have a video chat at least twice a week. But then a couple of days after my 16th birthday, things changed. It was a normal Sunday morning and I woke up and went to wash my face. Ah! There were red spots all over my cheeks. I screamed so loudly that I woke everybody up. Even my neighbors had to run over and ask what the scream was about. My parents took me to the hospital and I was diagnosed with a disease called lupus. For all of you who don't know what it is, it's a skin disease that causes rashes or sores. In my case, it was all over my cheeks, the same as what my grandma had. Worst of all, there was no cure. The doctors could only improve the way my skin looked, prevent scarring, and help me feel better overall. This couldn't be happening. Why me? When we got home, I ran right upstairs to my room and stared into the mirror. I'd gone from pretty to ugly in the space of a day. It wasn't fair. And then suddenly my phone rang. It was Julian. Oh no, in all the drama, I'd forgotten about our planned video call. I couldn't let him see me like this. I was so exhausted with all this lupus stuff that I couldn't think of a solution. So I just turned my phone off. I texted him the next day that I was busy so I couldn't FaceTime with him. This carried on for weeks. I just couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. Then he texted me saying that he got the message loud and clear, that I didn't want to be his friend anymore. I texted him back telling him this wasn't the case and I'd just been super busy. But the damage was done. He stopped calling me after that and even unfriended me on Facebook. And that was it. I lost my best friend and also my first love, all because I couldn't cope with my new appearance. Little by little, I was shutting myself off and pushing everyone around me away. I just didn't want anyone to see me like this. Instead, I wanted to hide away from the world. Each day, I'd watch my classmates hang out together and I'd walk off by myself and go to my favorite tree, lean against the trunk, close my eyes, listen to some sad songs, and remember all the good times I had with Julian. This was basically part of my daily routine during the whole 4 years of high school. School finished and I moved away to college. Things got better. I made a few friends who accepted me for the way I looked and slowly, I started to accept it too. There was this one tree on campus. It looked just like the one back at home, so I went there all the time. One day, I was sitting there reading a book when this guy in a baseball cap started measuring the ground. Then, without looking at me, he said, "Excuse me, can you please move?" I was confused, so I asked, sure, but why? The guy replied,
"Oh, the college is going to build a new cafeteria here, so we have to chop down this tree."
What? They wanted to chop down my favorite spot on campus just so that they could build some stupid cafeteria? No way! Who was this guy anyway? And didn't anyone ever tell him it was rude not to look people in the eyes when talking to them? I gave him a piece of my mind. You architects are all the same. You never give a damn about what you have to destroy to build an ugly building. Leave this tree alone or I'll chop you down. Then I gave him a really dirty look. He just shrugged and carried on measuring. This made me so mad that I kicked him in the butt, causing him to fall onto the ground. His cap fell off and whoa, it couldn't be. Julian? Was that really him? But how? Wasn't he in Germany? Why was he here? And why didn't he recognize me? I mean, I had a different haircut and all, but I didn't think I've changed that much. Or was it because of my lupus? Suddenly, I heard him say,
What the? Are you mad? What's wrong with you?
Oh gosh, I'd totally forgotten that he was still lying on the ground. I mumbled out sorry, and immediately rushed back to my dorm. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, all I could think about was Julian. He was so handsome and so tall. How could he have become so good looking? Why did this stupid disease pick me? There was my first love right in front of me after all those years apart. But because of my disease, he didn't know who I was. He blossomed and I hadn't. Maybe it was for the better that Julian didn't recognize me. If he knew this was how I look like now, oh boy, I didn't even want to imagine how embarrassed I would be. So, okay, let's just put it aside for now. What I first needed to do was save my tree. There's no way I was letting the college chop it down. I did some research and found out that the construction would begin in a week. So, I had time to convince as many students as I could to protest against it. And when the day came, I had about 20 people with me. We all held signs and said, "Save the tree" and "Stop the chop." The head of campus, Julian, and the construction workers were trying to make us leave, but we were persistent. At the end, they had to push back the construction dates. One of us remained by the tree at all times, come rain or shine. It was exhausting and cold, but it was worth it when the tree was saved. Then, one day when I was on tree guarding duty, my friend rushed over to me and excitedly told me that the college was going to change the location of the new building. That was such great news. Apparently, Julian had told them that the ground was more suitable in another location. Why would he help us all of a sudden? Did he have a change of mind? I went to class with those questions that kept bugging my mind. And right after school was out, I came over to the tree again, and to my surprise, I saw Julian standing next to it. I walked towards him and asked, "Why did you convince them to change the location of the building? I mean, we really appreciate it, but why the change of heart?" Julian froze for a second and then said,
Ever feel like your family is cursed? I live with my grandma, my mom, and my older sister. I'm surrounded by women, but not one man. It must be a curse because my grandparents had a terrible marriage, and my parents' marriage was a total fail too. So this made my mom and grandma super sensitive around men. They thought all men were dangerous and always warned me and my sister not to go near boys. I'm Gemma, by the way, and my sister's name is Lacey. She's the sweet one who always listens to what mom and grandma say, and I guess you could say I'm a rebel child. Most of my friends were boys, but of course, my family didn't know that. Whenever I spoke about my friends, I pretended they were all girls. Otherwise, my mom would probably kill me. Even though I was surrounded by male friends, when it came to love, it was a whole other story. I was actually quite shy about it all. Maybe my mom and grandma really had rubbed off on me, because whenever a boy told me he liked me, I didn't believe him. One time, in middle school though, I almost believed this boy. He said he had a huge crush on me and would even die for me. He would literally sit outside our front door from morning to night, waiting until I agreed to be his girlfriend. But he couldn't escape the wrath of my mom. When she caught him, she threw a bucket of water at him, and he immediately ran away. Clearly, he wouldn't die for me then. There were other boys who also said they couldn't live without me, but I still see them wandering around alive and well, so I guess my mom and grandma were right. Men are a bunch of liars. But there were always exceptions, and my exception was Brett. Oh, dreamy Brett. I met him in a record store, and we both went to grab the same record at exactly the same time. I was smitten from first glance. All those warnings about boys left my head, and I could barely see. My eyes had turned to heart emojis. The rest was history. We fell in love and became a couple, and eventually I plucked up the courage to bring him home. I bet no one could deny a cute guy like him, my grandma and mom included. Little did I know that I was just inviting him into the lion's den. As soon as he stepped into our house, he gave my grandma a hug and said,
"You must be Gemma's mom. I can see where she gets her good looks."
Then he turned to my mom and said,
"Hi, Lacey. You're even prettier than in the photos."
But then, of course, Lacey appeared, and the realization dawned on Brett's face, and he laughed and said he hadn't expected me to have such a young and beautiful grandma and mom. My mom and grandma were trying hard to hide their amusement, and Brett just winked at me. Oh boy, he was cunning. In the middle of dinner, when Brett went to the bathroom, I noticed my mom and grandma grinning at each other. They were up to something. What if they'd put something in his food? I didn't trust them one bit and asked them what was going on. But they just smiled sweetly and said, "Nothing, sweetie pie." I took a bite of his mashed potato, and it was so salty. I asked them why they'd done it, and my grandma said, "We just want to see if he's a liar like all other men. Honey, let's see if he'll choose to be a polite or an honest man." When Brett came back, my grandma asked him if he liked her cooking, and he said,
"It's delicious, thanks. I like that you don't hold back on the salt. Really brings out the natural flavors of the potato."
"Ha! That's my boy! Well done, Brett!" My grandma and mom didn't end their pranks there, though. They were determined to make a fool of Brett. My mom asked him to help her get dessert from the fridge, and she'd put a fake plastic spider on top of the cake. She obviously wanted to frighten him, but he didn't fall for it. He just scooped it off and left it on the table. And then after dinner, my grandma asked if he wanted to join her for a post-dinner smoke, and he politely declined. It was clear they weren't going to find his weaknesses that easily. When we finished dinner, Lacey went up to her room. Shortly after, my grandma and mom suddenly said they heard someone was calling outside, so they stood up and came out to check. I could see their frustrated faces as they couldn't find any reason to forbid my love story with Brett, so they must be going out to discuss. I told Brett to wait in the kitchen while I went to eavesdrop on them, but as soon as I walked into the hallway, all the lights went off, and I heard someone kicking the door down. I was so panicked that I just uncontrollably screamed loudly and could not stop shaking, holding my head and screaming for help in panic. God, I could even hear a sound like a gun being loaded. We were about to be robbed? I just stood there, frozen in place. I was terrified. But then, I felt a hand on my shoulder and almost jumped out of my skin. But luckily, it was just Brett. He pulled me close to him while holding something like a candlestick holder. Then he was about to leave me there to face whomever caused this. But I was so scared that I just held him tight and started sobbing. Suddenly, the lights came back on. After being dazzled for a moment, I noticed my mom and grandma standing right there in front of me. My grandma shouted, "Who are you?" I didn't know what she was talking about, so I looked up at Brett and jumped. It wasn't Brett. It was some random guy. I ran towards my mom and said, "He's a robber. He has a gun." My grandma just laughed and said, "There are no robbers, silly. This was just a test for your boyfriend. We wanted to see how brave he was." Then my grandma jerked her head towards the kitchen, and there Brett was, cowering under the table. Really? How did my mom and grandma expect him to react in such a dangerous situation? Anyway, it's such an embarrassment when seeing him like that. But wait, who was this random guy? Suddenly he spoke and said,
Actually, I'm Chris, Lacey's boyfriend."
My mom and grandma looked so shocked. My mom screamed upstairs,
"Lacey, get down here at once!"
Well, this was awkward. Turns out Chris and Lacey had been secretly dating for over a year.
He even had a rope ladder that he used to climb into her room every weekend. I couldn't believe it. I glanced over at Lacey. This whole time, I thought this young lady was innocent and up there reading in her bedroom, when actually, she just pretended to be a true believer of whatever Mom and Grandma said and was sneaking around with a boyfriend behind all of our backs. Greater wisdom than me. Although, there was no denying that Chris was a good guy. As soon as the lights had gone out, he'd hidden Lacey in a corner and came down to investigate and take care of me without worrying about the danger of it all. Poor Brett. He hadn't passed this test, but I couldn't blame him. As for my mom and grandma, they were so shocked, they couldn't even speak. Lacey asked them to accept Chris and give them official permission to date. But my mom and grandma just ignored her and went to their rooms. After that, Chris was over a lot, but my mom and grandma treated him in the same way they'd done with Brett, always testing him. One night, they even did a quiz to see how intelligent he was, and they even sent fake messages to Lacey's phone, pretending to be another guy to see how jealous he'd get. But he didn't fall for it. Him and Lacey were a solid couple. Poor Chris and Brett. They couldn't catch a break. My mom and grandma constantly said Brett was a coward and Chris was sneaky, and they were so rude to them. I realized no man could ever please them. Their pasts still haunted them, and their prejudices were so extreme. But no matter how much they hated our boyfriends, Lacey and I weren't going to give up. My grandma's birthday arrived, and Lacey and I said we had a big present for her. Grandma's response was, "Girls, the only present I want right now is for you both to dump those boyfriends of yours. That's the only thing that will make me happy." Lacey smiled and said, "Sure, Grandma, anything for you." Then she pulled out a pregnancy test and said, "But Grandma, I'm having a baby with Chris. If it'll make you happy, though, I'll break up with him and raise the baby by myself, just like how you raised Mom, and how Mom raised Gemma and me." My mom and grandma looked like they were going to pass out. And before they could say anything more, I continued, "Brett and I will break up too, although I want you to know how much I love him. If you'd prefer me to be lonely for the rest of my life, I'll do it, because like you always say, men are poison. In fact, I've decided to become a nun. I'm quitting school, and I'll leave for the monastery next week." At this, my mom burst into tears and grabbed my hand and said, "Baby, no, don't choose such a lonely path. Stay with us." My grandma was also crying and hugging Lacey, saying, "Sweetie, don't be stupid. Your baby can't grow up without a dad. Chris is an amazing guy. Don't listen to me. He's great. I'm so sorry." So, there you have it. Lacey and I are still with Chris and Brett, and we couldn't be happier. Mom and Grandma have accepted them, and dare I say it, they're even nice to them now. There's just one small problem, though. How is Lacey going to explain the fact that her belly isn't growing? Wink, wink. Looks like my mom and grandma aren't the only ones good at testing people. It must run in our family. Wish us luck. Rules, rules, rules. Moms sure do love dishing them out, don't they? I'm Nicole, by the way. And you see, my parents divorced when I was 8, so since then, it's just been me and Mom. Mom laid down a bunch of boring rules for me, but I hate following them. I'm 18, and I should be out having fun, right? To me, rules were made to be broken anyway, and trust me, I broke them. Only this led to my whole life changing. One day, I had an important math test, but I hate math. So I skipped school and went to the movies with my friends instead. I mean, hello? The last Avengers movie had just come out. No way was I missing it and getting spoilers. Maybe Mom would give me a detention for a few weeks, but it's no big deal, right? I arrived home to find Mom waiting for me. She glared at me and said, "Nicole, I received an interesting phone call from the school. It turns out you haven't been there all day. So, where have you been?" "Oh no! Busted!" I just shrugged and replied, out. It's those friends of yours, isn't it? They are a bad influence. I walked off to my room. Nicole, come back here and talk, she shouted after me, but I ignored her. Then she yelled out, I can't stand you and your childish attitude anymore. You're going to live with your dad. What? She was kicking me out. Wow, I didn't expect her to do that. Whatever. I was sick of being moaned at all the time. Surely Dad would be far more understanding. I hadn't seen Dad all that much. In fact, the last time was, I think it was my 16th birthday. He was a busy man, as he's the principal at this snooty boys' school. And Mom wasn't kidding. She called him up, and that evening, he showed up and loaded my stuff into the trunk of his car. It felt super awkward. I had no idea what to say to him. Then, about an hour into the seriously tedious journey, he said, I completed all the admission procedures for you, so you can start learning in my school tomorrow. What? It was an all-boys school, and I was a girl. Besides, no way was I studying somewhere where my dad was the principal. Panicked, I asked, But, Dad, isn't it an all-boys school? He said, It used to be, but of late, we've let a few female students in. I can't go there. You're the principal. It'll be so embarrassing. No way. I'll go to another school or something. He gave me a strict look and said, Mom told me all about your behavior in your old school, and it's unacceptable. So, you'll be learning at my school so I can keep an eye on you. This is not up for debate. OMG, I can't believe it. He was much stricter than Mom. So reluctantly, I muttered out, Fine, but only if you promise not to tell anyone I'm your daughter. He nodded and said, Okay, if that's what you want. The school was like something out of one of those weird movies. You know, where the characters think they're safe, but then start disappearing one by one. For starters, it was situated on a hill, miles from anything else. Inside, well, it was so masculine. Browns and grays, and I didn't see one picture in the entire building. The only female thing in the whole place was the girls' restroom. We had to share everything else with the boys. Talk about an inconvenience. The uniform was the same for boys and girls. An oversized shirt and baggy pants and these gross flat shoes. Yuck! During PE, girls were forced to do the same workout as the boys. Bench presses, push-ups, and playing soccer is not my idea of fun. Ugh! And there wasn't even a cheerleading squad. Then there were all these extra dumb rules for the girls, like only uniforms are allowed at school. No skirt, no dress, not even jeans. Do the top button of your shirt up. Tie your hair up into this ugly bun. No flirting with the boys. Yep, that was actually a rule. Can you believe this place? I didn't know whether this was a high school or a prison. I thought this was bad, but I soon realized this school had a major problem. Maybe it's because this school was originally boys only, but man, this place didn't appreciate girls at all. Once in a history class, the teacher asked us what year Abraham Lincoln became president. Easy. But before I could even raise my hand, she continued, This question seemed too hard for girls, so do any of the boys know the answer? What? How could she say that? What was with her male chauvinist attitude? This put me in a bad mood, so during dinner, I decided to moan to Dad about it. He needed to know how ridiculous his school was, so I told him how I hated his dumb rules and how sexist the teachers were. He glared at me and told me that there weren't enough girls at the school to warrant a separate uniform. Moreover, if girls dressed up, it would only cause distractions for the boys. As for the history teacher, it was just because boys often have larger knowledge than girls on this matter, so maybe she just didn't want to embarrass the girls in case they couldn't give out the right answer. Huh, what kind of argument was this? It wasn't the olden days. Jeez, these oldies needed to get with the decade. Okay, fine. I'll prove to the whole school and all the teachers that there weren't only boys here. The next day, I gathered all the girls from my class. In fact, there were only 2 of them, Angela and Carly, and we met up in the only girly place, the girls' restroom. Then I told them, "Hey girls, welcome to our club, The Doll. I think it's about time we fought for our rights and presence in this school. As girls matter too, right?" At first, they both seemed worried. I get it. They didn't want to get in trouble. But I soon managed to convince them that it'd be fine. Fun, even. So they came around and agreed. First up, it was time to do something about this awful uniform. We tied up our shirts to expose our waists, and I helped the others put subtle makeup on, so our skin looked like it had a natural glow to it. Then we all put glittery hair accessories and colorful scrunchies in our hair to jazz up our updos. Carly looked in the mirror and said, "Okay, maybe our uniform isn't so bad." And we all burst out laughing. Now, it was time to make an entrance. We all walked along the corridor together. All the boys and girls turned around to look at us with admiring eyes and open mouths. One boy even dropped his stack of books on the floor, and another one walked into his locker. Ha! The charm of girls was absolutely irresistible, right? Soon, we became a popular group around the school. The boys wanted to talk to us, and girls from other classes also joined our group, and I showed them how to style up their uniforms. It's great, right? Yep. There's a problem. The teachers were old fogies who didn't appreciate style. One day, before class, one teacher came up to me and my friends and accused us of ruining the dignity of the uniform and of exerting negative influences on other students. So I told her, "We aren't violating any of the school's previous rules. We wear the uniform, we keep our top button done up, and we have the regulation hairstyle. Dressing up is a girl's prerogative. Besides, if boys are distracted, it's their fault, not ours, so you can't blame us for that." After that, I seemed to become a thorn in the side of all the teachers. In every subject, I would always be asked to answer the most difficult questions. And, of course, I didn't know the right answer. I mean, nobody knew it. And then they would give me a gloating look. Ugh, how childish they were. Another time, I was in the lunch queue, and when it was my turn, I chose barbecue chicken drumsticks, as they're my favorite. However, to my surprise, the canteen server said there was no chicken left, then put this weird oatmeal slop on my plate. Ew! I could see there were loads of chicken left, so why was she being so unreasonable? I skipped the gross slop, so as soon as I got home from school, I was so hungry. So I made myself a huge bowl of noodles. Dad saw me devouring the food, then smiled and asked, "Has causing trouble at school all day made you that hungry?" In between my mouthfuls of food, I told him what had happened with the teacher, and in the canteen. He just smiled and said it was because I was too stubborn. What kind of an excuse was that? I mean, when was starving students a good idea? The next morning, I drowsily walked into class and sat down at my desk. That's when I realized I'd forgotten my phone. Well, this totally sucked, so I moaned to Angela. These teachers make my life a misery, and now I don't even have my phone. Today's going to be a long one. Suddenly, someone knocked on my desk. I looked up and saw my dad, aka the principal, standing there in front of me. I was so surprised that before I could say anything, he said, "Hey, Cupcake, you left your phone at home. Oh, and I brought you breakfast, as you know how grumpy you get when you're hungry." Then he put my phone and a sandwich on my desk, stroked my hair, then left. What was he doing? Did he forget his promise? Needless to say, my classmates looked shocked. Angela stared at me and said, "Huh? The principal is your dad? Unbelievable! Why didn't you tell us?" I sat there open-mouthed. This was the most awkward thing ever. "Thanks a lot, Dad." But little did I know, that was just the start of a new chapter of craziness. Things were about to get even worse. And oh boy, you wouldn't want to miss out on that. Hey, it's Haley again. So, as amazing as being famous is, it also comes with some problems. The first one being Eric. Having a famous ex around is awkward. Secondly, it's all the unknowns that being in the public eye brought with it. For instance, I was currently backstage at my first mini show, terrified, because I was pretty sure someone just took a picture of me in an unzipped dress. I worriedly looked at Dean. Did you see who that was? Why would someone take those kind of pictures? Oh no, what if they sell them to the press? Dean gave me a reassuring look and said,
Don't worry. I promise I'll definitely find out who did it. Now, please relax, as your performance is in any minute, and you wouldn't want to let this affect it, right?
Then I watched him leave. What he said made sense. This was an important show for me and Phil, so I couldn't mess things up. When I was on the stage, I pushed all my worries to the side and concentrated on what I did best, singing my heart out. Afterward, we hung around and had a little fan meeting. It was crazy being around people that knew my name and wanted selfies with me. Phil was getting plenty of attention too. It seemed he was a hit with the fangirls. I heard them saying how handsome they thought he was, and so cool. Phil may have kept a straight face, but I knew he liked it really. I mean, come on, who wouldn't? Then, someone even shouted that Phil and I made a beautiful couple. Phil almost burst out laughing, and I just smiled shyly. Then one girl asked me if I had any plans besides singing. I didn't know how to answer, as I'd never thought about doing anything besides singing before. You should be a vlogger, one girl suggested. Or you could be in movies, another said. Oh, that didn't sound too bad. Thinking about it, trying something new alongside my singing might help promote our music and increase my popularity. It was definitely something to consider, thanks to my awesome fans. Then, as luck would have it, I found out that a famous director was holding auditions for a supporting role in his project. It was a perfect chance for beginners like me to learn from these veteran actors. Besides, it wouldn't take much time, so I could still have time for music. So I immediately signed up to participate. The day of the casting arrived, and I was excited, but also really worried. The last time I'd attended an audition was during my freshman year of swing club. Wow, time sure does fly. I was sitting in the waiting room when I saw a familiar face sitting in the corner. It was Eric. He must have been trying out for a part too. Suddenly, our eyes met, but I immediately avoided his gaze. My heart began to skip a beat, and it wasn't due to nerves. It was down to seeing him. Even after all this time, he still had that effect on me. Sigh. Before I could decide whether I should go and say hi to him or not, a very hot guy walked over to me. I recognized him from a few hit movies and knew he was a big deal. He smiled at me and said, "Are you Haley? As in, the singer?" I nodded back, awestruck that this super famous guy knew who I was. He sat down next to me and asked me if I was worried about my audition. I told him I was a bit. So he started telling me about some of his previous auditions and experiences. At first, it was great hearing this stuff from a pro, but then he asked me if I wanted to hang out with him on the weekend. I started to feel a bit uncomfortable because of his flirty behaviors, but I didn't know how to politely say no. I tried to avoid his eyes while thinking of an excuse, and suddenly, I thought of Eric, so I glanced over in his direction, but he'd gone. Meanwhile, that actor guy started to move closer to me, wrapped his arm around my shoulder, and stroked my hair. I kind of started to panic. Then suddenly, I felt someone grabbing my hand and pulling me away. Turns out, it was Eric. What was he doing? Eric pulled me to the balcony at the end of the hallway. I glared at him. What was that for? I'm not yours to drag to places whenever you want. He replied, I don't like you chatting with other guys, especially not slimeballs like him. I felt my heart beating faster, but I tried to keep my cool as I replied, You have no say in who I can and can't talk to. We're not even friends. Eric looked at me with sad eyes. I'm so sorry, Haley. I don't want it to be like this. Please forgive me. I miss you. This was so typical of Eric. winding me up before my audition. So I growled out, "Sorry is no use to me. You have no idea how much you hurt me." Unexpectedly, he replied,
"I will break up with Clara." Well, no. The truth is, there was nothing between me and Clara in the first place.
"Huh, that sounds familiar. You must have said the same thing to Clara to be with her while you were still dating me, right?" I said, then started to walk off. He replied with a low voice,
"Everything was forced by the company."
I stopped on the spot and looked at him, then angrily said, "Oh, you think I'll trust you again? I'm no longer the innocent girl who believes everything you say." After a moment of silence, he sighed, then told me everything. When he rose to fame and was working with Clara, she was always openly showing affection for him, even though Eric has told her to stop many times, and once she even confessed her feelings towards him. He rejected her immediately, as he was with me and didn't like her in that way. I rolled my eyes and said, "Yeah, right. If you really rejected her feelings right away, then things wouldn't be this way." Eric cut off my words.
"Please just listen to me first."
Then he continued,
"Clara didn't take the rejection well, so she posted our photo on Instagram and spread rumors with the press that we were dating. At the time, I was furious and wanted to correct the press, but Will stopped me. He even said that our dating rumors were getting a very good response from our fans, so he told me to go along with it."
I looked straight at him and said, "Okay, so there's nothing between the two of you, but you still chose to listen to the company and leave me without any explanation, right?" He said,
"I'm so sorry, but they promised me that it'd only be until the duet with Clara was released. Besides, they even offered to help you become famous once it's done. That's why I endured it all. I did it for you."
Whoa, this whole thing was unbelievable. I didn't expect that company to be that bad, but thank God that it turned out there was really nothing between Eric and Clara, just as I suspected. So I said, "You didn't have to do that. I can stand up on my own." Then Eric smiled at me and held my hand.
"Yep, I shouldn't worry so much, since my girl here is so talented. Haley, I messed up, but I did it with good intentions. Can you forgive me?"
My feelings were really chaotic, surprised, happy, and guilty at the same time. As confusing as it all was, I knew that I still loved Eric. So with teary eyes, I nodded. Then he pulled me into his arms. Suddenly, I remembered one thing. I asked him, what about the bouquets? You sent me those purple peonies, right?" He shyly nodded.
"Yes, they were from me, so you'd know I was thinking about you."
I squeezed him tight and whispered a thank you. I couldn't believe all this, as if I just got a huge weight off my shoulders now that everything has been resolved. After that, I did my audition. I'm not sure how well it went, as my mind was elsewhere. Afterward, Eric drove me to a secluded part of the beach, and we held hands and went for a walk on the sand. I felt so happy to see the old Eric again, the real him, the one I'd fallen in love with. So, you see, Eric and I got back together, but of course, we kept it a secret from the public. Only our close friends knew about it. I told Anna and Kurt over video call, and Anna cheered, but Kurt was a bit more skeptical and told me to be careful, as once a snake, always a snake. But I didn't think much about it, as me and Eric were in our own euphoria. Everything seemed to be going well, too well. And then, something terrible happened. One day, I was having a slump while trying to compose my first song at home, so I surfed the internet for a bit, hoping to find some inspiration. Then suddenly, I saw my name trending on Twitter, so I quickly clicked on one article. The article said that I was a rude and disrespectful girl. What? They even confirmed that the news was revealed by a veteran actor in the showbiz world, but no name was given. Could it have been that actor guy from the audition? Surely, the fact that Eric suddenly pulled me away had irritated him, but he turned out to be not much of a decent guy either. And the problem is that in Hollywood, rumors have a way of sticking. As a result, a few of my advertising contracts were canceled, and so were some of our gigs. One teen magazine even called the office to tell us that they wouldn't publish my interview anymore, as I was a bad influence on their young readers. It was so embarrassing. I was struggling, but our company too had a hard time dealing with this scandal. I felt guilty, as it could affect the entire company's image, but both Dean and Phil reassured me that it would pass, and that malicious rumors came with the fame. I tried to stay strong and believe it would blow over, but then my anti-fan base grew. There were forums and hate clubs all about me. You know, even if you read 1,000 compliments, that one negative comment is the only thing that's left on your mind. I tried not to read them, but they were everywhere, saying horrible stuff about my singing, my outfits, and the way I look. One afternoon, I was lying in bed thinking, when suddenly I heard the doorbell. I feared that it was one of the anti-fans who'd come to throw paint on me or something. I peeked through the peephole and saw Eric standing there with a big hat and sunglasses. OMG! What was he doing here? I quickly opened the door and nervously looked around, then hissed at him. Eric, what are you doing here? Someone might spot you. He replied,
Haley, you're the most important person in my life. I'd trade it all for you.
His kind words made me so happy. That day, Eric cooked me a delicious meal. Then he taught me how to deal with haters and ignore the comments. I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. But unfortunately, everything didn't stop there.
Hey, Daisy here. I'm just your normal 19-year-old college girl living away from home for the first time. And can't deny that it could get lonely sometimes. And I felt homesick a lot. But it's okay though, as I have Lucas, my loving boyfriend. Okay, yeah, his family is well off, so he always treats me to nice places and buys me nice gifts. A few months ago, he told me to move in with him in his family's mansion. And I've agreed. But don't get me wrong, I'm not a gold digger at all. I just had no other choice. It all started one night when thieves broke into my apartment while I was asleep. It was terrifying. I knew they were ransacking my living room and stealing my TV and laptop, but I'd rather stay put to protect myself. After that, I didn't want to be home alone at all anymore. Lucas, too, was worried for me, so one evening he told me, Daisy, I think you should come live with me, at least until you find a roommate. Wow. I wasn't expecting that, but I guess it made sense. I felt a bit awkward about it, though, as I've only been to his house, or should I say his parents' mansion, a few times. And although there was plenty of space, and his parents adored me, but I didn't want to feel like I was intruding. Sensing my apprehension, he continued, I've explained the situation to my parents, and they're cool with it. I smiled at him and replied, well, okay then, but it will just be temporary. Before I moved in with Lucas and his family, I felt very anxious. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to adapt to their lifestyle, and I didn't want to upset his parents. I worried a lot, but not once did I think my trouble would be with the maid. Yep, you heard me right. On my first day at the mansion, a cheerful woman immediately ran towards me and greeted me. Mrs. Harris introduced her to me. This is our maid, Sarah. She's been with us for years, so if you have any problem, just ask her. We're all family here. Make yourself comfortable. Then Sarah quickly grabbed my suitcase and smiled at me. Miss, let me help you with that. I'll show you to the room. It was so strange having someone else do stuff for me like this. I could just smile back and follow her upstairs. That made me feel so welcomed here, and how nice this maid was. Maybe we could be friends. But suddenly, a thump cuts off my thoughts. It was Sarah. She'd thrown my suitcase to the floor, then said, What on earth do you have in there? Carry it yourself. Your room is down the hallway to the left. And she walked off. What was that? Did I do something wrong? I quickly picked up my stuff in confusion. I didn't want to make an enemy of anyone here, especially not on my first day. So after I unpacked my stuff, I went down to the kitchen to help her prepare dinner. She was still so grumpy at me and told me to just get lost as I'd only be in her way. I remained persistent as I really wanted to resolve whatever her misunderstandings about me were. Eventually, she gave in and said, "Fine, you want to help? Go dice up all of those onions." "Yes, sure, but all of these?" I asked her while staring at a basket full of onions. "Are you going to help me or not?" she said sharply. I replied, Okay, don't worry, I'll do it." I tried starting up a convo with her, but she just rolled her eyes at me. Meanwhile, the onions were giving me hell. My eyes were burning and tears were streaming out. Ouch! When I finally finished, she stared at my swollen eyes and said, "If you're that upset about living here, you could just leave." "It's the onions," I told her. She smirked as she took them off me, then walked straight to the trash and threw them away, saying, "You took too long. I didn't need it anymore." What? My face dropped, but I was far too exhausted to argue with her anyway. That's when Lucas and his parents came down for dinner. Sarah quickly set up the tables, then called me over with a bright smile as she pulled out a chair for me. "Miss Campbell, please take a seat. Dinner is ready." Was she for real? I couldn't keep up with her constant change in personality. After dinner, I approached Sarah while she was doing the dishes. "Look, I'm sorry, but did I do something to upset you?" "Yes, you sure did. You waltz around like you own the place, but you're nothing more than a parasite. And I won't let you worm your way into my home." Before I had time to process her words, she grabbed an expensive-looking marble plate and smirked at me as she dropped it onto the ground. Then, with a piece of broken plate, she quickly slit her hand and yelled out loud, "Miss, I'm so sorry for vexing you, but you shouldn't have broken this. It's Mr. Harris's favorite plate." Hearing the crashing sound, everyone quickly gathered in the kitchen and stared at me for answers. I immediately explained, "No, it's not like that." But Mrs. Harris said, "It's okay. Let's help Sarah first." Then she led her off to get the first aid kit. I grabbed Lucas's arm. "Babe, I really didn't do that." He reassured me with a smile. "Daisy, don't worry about it." "You don't understand. Sarah did it on purpose and blamed me." He laughed as if he'd just heard something ridiculous, then said, "No way. I bet it was just some sort of misunderstanding. Sarah is really nice. Don't worry, you two will get close in no time. Now let me clean up this mess. You go and relax." I felt frustrated and fed up, but I reluctantly went back to my room. This girl was definitely onto me. But for what reason? Over the following weeks, her vendetta against me continued. She washed my white clothes with colored ones, then intentionally threw away my stuff and made out she mistook it for trash while cleaning my room. She put extra hot chili flakes in my food, then rushed over with a glass of water when I started to choke, and so on. Worse still, Lucas and his parents wouldn't hear a bad word said against her. They were completely oblivious to how crazy she was. I didn't understand why she hated me so much. Was she jealous of me or something? All right then. If she wanted to play with me, then game on. So I decided to spy on her to catch her red-handed and show everyone her true self. My chance to expose her finally arrived. I was passing her room and I saw her holding a watch. I recognized it. It was Mr. Harris's. She looked shifty as she placed it into her drawer and hid it underneath some of her clothes. Aha! Got her. I quickly ran to the garden to find Mrs. Harris and managed to persuade her to come with me to Sarah's room. Sarah stood by looking all innocent as Mrs. Harris checked her drawer, but the watch wasn't there, and instead we found it still intact on the vanity in the master bedroom. Huh? At that moment, Sarah suddenly bawled out, "Ma'am, I would never steal from you. You know that. I've gone out of my way to please Miss Campbell here, but she's intent on making my life a misery." Oh my God. Those crocodile tears. Did she have no shame? I tried explaining myself to Mrs. Harris, but she held up her hand and told me she didn't want to hear it. I wanted to make amends, so the next morning, I prepared Mrs. Harris's favorite smoothie and breakfast for her. I set it up nicely on the dining table, then went upstairs to get her, smirking at Sarah as she passed by. Mrs. Harris seemed happy with the gesture, but just an hour later, she said she didn't feel well. She was clutching her stomach as she glared at me and blamed me for poisoning her food. What? How frustrating. And Lucas wasn't even home for me to talk to. So I went to the kitchen to check the expiration date of everything I'd used. But I swear it was all fresh. I even went through the trash to check the used milk carton. That's when I saw some sesame seeds in there. That's odd, as I knew Mrs. Harris was allergic to them, so we never had them in the house. It had to be Sarah. She must have poisoned the breakfast with them when I was out of the room. Later that day, Mrs. Harris was feeling better, so I went to see her and told her that I was leaving, on one condition. Then I persuaded her to come into my room and hide in my closet. By this point, I think she was willing to do anything just to get me out of her house. Then I called Sarah over to help me pack up my stuff. She stepped into my room with a cocky smile and knocked over the box of my stuff, then said, "I was always going to win." I replied, "Fine, you win. But before I leave, I want to ask you something. You put sesame seeds in the breakfast I made for Mrs. Harris, didn't you?" Sarah looked around to check no one else was about before she grinned at me and said, "Yes, it was me, all me. While you were sucking up to Mrs. Harris, I ground some up and mixed them into the disgusting smoothie you made. Oh, I also pretended to steal the watch because I knew you were spying on me. Geez, you made it so easy." "But why?" I asked. "But why?" She imitated my voice. "Because this is my family. I've lived here for years. You can't just show up all pretty and carefree and expect to have everything and push me out of my own home. I never wanted to push you out. All I wanted was to be your friend." As if. This is my gold mine, not yours. Sooner or later, all of this will be mine, and God knows I deserve it. I've put up with this annoying family and a poor salary for years. Mr. Harris always dreamed of having a daughter, but no, he's stuck with that dumb son of his. It's only a matter of time until he realizes I can be the daughter he longed for. Or, now that you won't be around, it'll be easy for me to trap Lucas by having his baby. Either way, the winner is always me. Suddenly, the wardrobe doors burst open, and out emerged Mrs. Harris looking furious. She pulled Sarah's hair and dragged her out of the room. Wow, who knew the mild-mannered Mrs. Harris could be so kick-ass? I guess everyone has a hidden side. Anyway, this proved my innocence, and Sarah was kicked out right on the spot. Then Mrs. Harris apologized to me and insisted that I should keep staying with them. I thanked her for the offer, but politely declined. As I felt ready to leave and move in with my friend, I was just relieved that she'd learned the truth and that Sarah had gone once and for all. So, Lucas and I are still together and are very happy. Yes, it was annoying he didn't believe me at first, but he's such a sweet and trusting guy that he'd never expect someone could be capable of such horrible things. But hey, that's just one of the many reasons why I love him. As for his parents, well, I still visit them sometimes. I even cook for them now and then, but thankfully, there have been no more sesame seed incidents, and there's no more crazy maid to contend with. Phew!
Hi guys, I'm Sam, and boy, do I have a crazy story to tell you. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever pretended to be gay to get close to a girl? Don't adjust your ears, you heard me right. Crazy, huh? Well, go get yourself some popcorn and stay tuned, as I'm going to tell you all about it. It began with my childhood sweetheart, Jeanette. We were together for 9 years and had been living together for 4 years. The most commonly asked question our friends and family threw at me was, "Why haven't you proposed yet?" I always made a joke of it and said something like, "All in good time." But the truth was, we were both still so young, and I just didn't feel ready to take that plunge yet. But surely, we will get married eventually. Then one day at work, me and my team got high praise for a big project we'd aced. To celebrate, I invited them over to mine to have a celebratory pizza lunch break. I knew Jeanette was working from home, but I didn't think she'd mind. I mean, who wouldn't want pizza? I led my colleagues into my place saying, "Hi honey, I'm home." Then my foot ended up entangled in something and I almost fell over. I reached down to free myself and lifted a bra. That's when I saw that there was a trail of clothes all over the floor. Then I heard moaning sounds coming from the bedroom. Oh dear God, please no. If she was doing what I thought she was, I would slam my head to a wall. And guess what? I walked into the bedroom, and there was Jeanette, in our bed with some other dude. They were so preoccupied that they didn't even notice me, so I coughed loudly to get their attention. She looked completely shocked, then sputtered out, "Sam, what are you doing here? Aren't you working?" Wow, this girl even dared to question me? I replied, "Oh, now you suddenly care about me? Ain't I the one who should be asking what on earth you guys are doing? Can't believe this." Then I walked out of there and back into the living room where all of my colleagues were standing there gawping at me. Oh no, I'd forgotten about them. I tried to keep some sort of composure as I politely asked them to leave, and also said I may be a little bit late back to work. Then that dude appeared and started picking his clothes off the floor. I was so mad I grabbed his pants and one of his sneakers and chucked them in the trash. Ha! Have fun smelling of garbage all day, jerk. After he left, I asked Jeanette why she did it. but she showed no sign of guilt or shame. She just sat there reasoning that she'd been waiting for me to propose for years, but I never had. She wasn't getting any younger, and she felt like she was wasting her life with someone who didn't seem able to fully commit to her. What? This was absurd. Of course I planned on proposing. I mean, maybe in a year or two. She just needed to wait, but no. Instead, she cheated on me with a guy that didn't even come close to me on the looks front. I mean, come on. At least pick someone who looked like Captain America. Then it would be a fair competition. Of course, Jeanette and I broke up after that. Thank God I found out she was a cheater before I actually married her. What a lucky escape. Phew. Okay, who was I trying to kid? The reality is, I was heartbroken. And worse still, everyone at work knew what she'd done. The only thing keeping me going were ice cream-fueled nights in watching low-budget horror movies. On one such night, some of my guy friends showed up and insisted on taking me out. I didn't want to go anywhere, but my friends didn't take no for an answer. Before long, I was in a bar drinking a beer and listening to my gay friend go on about how amazing his boyfriend was. Thinking about it, maybe he had a point. Girls were bossy, controlling, and always seemed in a hurry to reach life milestones. But guys weren't like that. Suddenly, I had an idea. I was so done with girls, but the truth is, I was lonely. So why didn't I give dating a guy a go? Yeah, I know it sounded crazy, but whatever. Who knows, maybe I was really gay and destined to be with a guy? So, that evening when I got home, I downloaded a dating app and started swiping for my dream man. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon Grant. He was wearing a Stranger Things t-shirt, and he was attractive. Although not as good-looking as me, of course. We started chatting, and a few days later, he asked me out on a date, and I agreed. We went to some fast food restaurant and ate greasy burgers, which Jeanette hated. Then we talked about superhero movies, which Jeanette also hated. It was refreshing being out with someone that didn't count calories or turn their nose up at geeky references. I walked home feeling positive, but as I passed a bubble tea cafe, something fell through the air and soaked me. What the hell, and what was I tasting? It was really sweet. I looked at myself and, was that bubble tea? I couldn't believe it. Somebody had just thrown a cup of bubble tea on my head. I looked around me to find the culprit. That's when I saw some shocked-looking girl running over to me. She was muttering out something about being really sorry and how she was aiming at her boyfriend but missed. By this point, I was in a foul mood. So I said to her, "Girl, your aim is lousy." Then I walked off. Man, all girls do is cause me grief. I was so done with them. So when Grant asked me out on another date, I said yes. We ended up in some cafe so we could have a little chit-chat. Suddenly, Grant reached over and took my hand. Oh my God, what should I do? Should I pull my hand back? But that would be so rude. All I wanted was to quickly get out of this dilemma. So I rambled out something about remembering I had to meet my parents. Then I quickly got out of there. Okay, so I'd had a revelation. I 100% wasn't gay. Thank God we stopped at holding hands. If he tried to kiss me, I might have fainted from the shock. Suddenly, my phone beeped. It was a message from my annoying cousin James with a photo attached. Oh my God, it was me and Grant holding hands. How come I didn't notice that James was in the same cafe as us? His message read, "Give me your Avengers action figure collection or I'm sending this to your parents." What? Didn't he have better things to do than to blackmail me? No way I would give him my precious collection. If I saw him, I would have even given him a smack in the head for this childish move. I ignored his idle threats. That idiot couldn't scare me anyway. I decided I needed a break from dating. Maybe I needed a new hobby, such as reading. Yeah, reading would be a great way to distract myself. So the next day I went to the bookstore when suddenly I saw Jeanette. Oh great, what was she doing here? I freaked out, so I grabbed the nearest book to me and pretended to read it. Phew, she hadn't seen me, had she? Then suddenly I hear her voice saying, "Sam, is that you?" I lowered the book and forced a fake smile and greeted her back. Then she pointed at the book I was holding and said, "Is that for your niece?" Seeing her had made me all flustered, so I muttered out, "No, it's for me." She gave me a weird look, then said, "Oh, I didn't realize you were into those kinds of novels." What? I looked at the book I was holding. Oh, just great. I was holding the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I was about to correct myself when suddenly some seriously handsome guy appeared and put his hand on Jeanette's waist. "Sam, this is Nick, my fiancé." She showed me the massive diamond ring on her finger. This Nick dude shook my hand. Well, he had a firm grip. Then they started giving each other lovey-dovey looks. This was my cue to leave, so I put that book down, muttered out a goodbye, and hurried out of there. Great. Jeanette had got herself some other hunk, and I was feeling like a loser. I needed to clear my head, so I went for a long walk and found myself at the lake where Jeanette and I went for our first date. Standing there, I remembered how a pigeon had pooped on her jacket, and I'd laughed so much I tripped and dropped my phone in the lake. Ah, the good old days. My memories were interrupted by the sounds of someone sobbing. That's when I spotted a crying girl sitting by the lake. Suddenly, she stood up and it looked like she was going to jump. Panic-stricken, I ran over to her and grabbed her arm to stop her. She got so startled that she punched me right in the face. My nose was bleeding and my mouth swelled up like I'd been stung by a swarm of bees. I screamed, "What the heck?" and gave the girl a dirty look. Oh my God, not her again. It was the bubble tea girl. What was it with me and this girl? She's surely bad news. Every time we met, I ended up getting hit. I'm sorry, but my body couldn't handle any of that anymore. And it seemed like she also recognized me, so she immediately apologized and asked if I was okay. I was super mad, so I yelled at her, "No, I'm not okay. And what on earth do you think you're doing? No matter how bad your problems are, you should never do such selfish things. Do you really want to leave this world all behind?" The girl gave me a weird look and said, "Huh? What are you talking about?" Turns out it was all a misunderstanding. She wasn't trying to jump in the lake. She just wanted to throw away the ring her boyfriend had given her. Oops. She told me how she'd caught him cheating on her at her birthday party. With her cousin. Ouch. I thought my ex was the worst. But her ex sounded like the jerkiest jerk ever. We grabbed a drink, not bubble tea, and sat by the lake and chatted for a while. It turns out she's actually all right. I mean, she's pretty cute and funny, and her favorite superhero is Black Widow. I mean, she's a kick-ass choice, and though, no, I think I might have a crush on her. By the time we said our goodbyes, she'd stopped crying and was actually smiling, so that meant she liked me too, right? As I walked home, I realized something. I'd forgotten to get her number. Oh, man, I was so stupid. And even her name was a mystery. I mean, it wasn't like she was actually called Bubble Tea Girl, so I couldn't even look her up. Real good job there, Sammy boy. Aren't you guys curious about if I ever got to know her name? Stay tuned for the next part. The fun is yet to come.
Hi, my name's Baron, and I'm 17. I guess that every student has at least one teacher that they hate, right? In my case, it's my PE teacher, Mr. Green. You're probably wondering why, so here we go. I'm an academic kid, and the sporty way of life just isn't for me. I actually enjoy studying, especially anything math and science related. I just don't understand why the school forces me to do PE. Spending hours jumping about in a sweaty mess just seems pointless to me. I could be using this time to read a coding book or something. I wasn't built for sports. I was the skinny kid who turned bright red just thinking about running. Then, during one torturous PE lesson, I couldn't jump over the horizontal bar at the boys' height. So the teacher lowered it to the girls' height for me, and worse still, I still couldn't jump over it. Humiliating. And after that, some small-brained boys nicknamed me Miss High Jump. Ugh, how annoying. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, in steps a new PE teacher, Mr. Green. Honestly, he was quite popular at school, as he was good-looking, muscular, and was a national medalist in the pole jump. Whenever he appeared, girls' squeals would be heard across the hall, and boys kept following him to ask about his diet and workout plan to get six-pack abs. Meanwhile, I couldn't stand him a bit. What's so good about that Hulk guy? Once I even spotted him checking out his reflection in his stopwatch. Pathetic. Mr. Green made the PE class hell. He always made us do these stupid exercise routines. Then when I messed up, he corrected me in front of everyone. It was so humiliating. Then he said, "Baron, I get that sport is your weakness, so let's practice more and then you'll get bigger." Firstly, I didn't want to bulk up. And secondly, his actions made me a complete joke to my classmates. Why was he so strict with me? Was it because I was the only one not staring at him with gooey eyes? Great, as if it wasn't bad enough being called Miss High Jump, now I had Mr. Green to deal with. So game on. It's time I hit him where it hurts, his appearance. I snuck into my mom's room and took one of her red lipsticks. Then I smeared it on his red whistle. And as expected, after blowing it, his lips were fully covered with red lipstick. It was so funny. Not so much Mr. Green anymore, more like Mr. Red. Everyone was laughing, but no one told him why. Seeing his confused face was so hilarious. But then he went to the bathroom and seconds later he shouted. I rushed to see his reaction, and OMG, it was priceless. However, catching me grinning at the bathroom door, he seemed to know who's to blame. Oops. After that, he was stricter with me. He always made me lug the training equipment for the whole class. Yes, only me. So I decided to get my own back. I poked some small holes in one of the tennis balls, then filled it with black ink. As expected, when he hit it, all the ink inside went on his face and clothes. Ha! He looked like an octopus. Of course, he knew it was me, so I ended up with a week's detention, but it was so worth it. That's when Mr. Green got determined to make my life a misery. He forced me to run extra laps on the field, and made me attempt hurdles that I was never going to clear. And then he just smirked at me and said something like, "Well, young Baron, practice makes perfect." The feud between us was endless. However, I soon had something much more important to care about. There was a new girl in my class called Susie, and oh boy was she pretty. It was love at first sight, but unfortunately, I wasn't alone in liking her. Whatever, the other boys might have the brawn, but I had the brains, so I spent hours thinking up ways to impress her and to make her mine. I don't have a lot of experience in this sort of thing, so I turned to romantic films for help. And I quickly learned that girls loved soppy gestures, so I put a love letter in her locker. I even sprayed some of my mom's perfume on it. Girls like fragrant things, right? But when she opened the locker door, dozens of letters like mine fell out. Another time, I brought her some cupcakes. I planned to get to class early and leave them on her desk. Only when I stepped in the classroom, her desk was already covered in cakes, chocolate, and drinks. It was like stepping into a candy store. I needed to change the plan. I'd have to think big if I was going to impress Susie. So one day, I asked some friends to go up to Susie and annoy her. And then when she freaked out, I would swoop in to protect her. You know, like a hero. Everything was going according to plan, and I was about to run over and save the day, but then Mr. Green suddenly appeared. He scolded them and even threatened to report them to the principal. They were scared to death and immediately ran away. Mission failed. I was about to leave when suddenly I saw Mr. Green grab Susie's arm and whispered something to her. Whoa, what a slime ball! Susie looked really annoyed, but he didn't give up. I was so mad I ran over there and yelled at him. Let her go, or else I'll report this to the principal. Then, to his surprise, I grabbed her hand and led her away. After a while, I turned to Susie and asked, "Are you okay?" She smiled and said, "Yeah, thanks for helping me." Her bright smile drove me crazy. I stammered, "You're welcome. If he pesters you again, just tell me." And could you believe it? After that day, Susie and I became closer. She even texted me whenever she had problems with math, physics, or other subjects. See? Brain always wins. Then the following week, during another torturous PE class, I noticed Mr. Green trying to hand Susie a bottle of water. She wouldn't take it from him, but he kept on trying to pass it to her. What a weirdo. Fueled by love, I ran over to them, grabbed the water bottle, then said, "She doesn't want it, so leave her alone." I led her over to the fountain to calm down. Then seeing how sad she looked, I said, "Don't worry, I won't let him harm you." She turned to me and replied, "It's okay. I don't think he means anything by it. Maybe he just cares about me." I interrupted her. "No, he isn't a good guy. He wants you." She laughed and said that I got it all wrong, but I still felt worried, so I said, "Today after class, let me walk you home." At first she refused, but I was insistent, so in the end she agreed. After that, I walked her home every day after school, and guess what? It turns out we got on so well. Time zooms by when I'm with her. I guess I should be thanking Mr. Green. It's because of him Susie knows who I am. But nah, he's a jerk. How dare he bug Susie? He was way out of line. He needed to be stopped. So one day I went to the sports hall where Mr. Green was arranging equipment, approached him and said, "I know you like Susie, but she doesn't like you, so please stop disturbing her. If I report this to the principal, you'll lose your job." He continued to sort out the equipment, then smirking he replied, "It's not any of your business." This made me so mad, so I yelled at him. "It is my business, as I love Susie and I'll protect her at all costs." He laughed. "You're not in a position to talk to me about this. Come back when you're Susie's official boyfriend." What? How dare he say that? His words played on my mind, so that evening I decided to go to Susie's house to confess my feelings towards her. However, as soon as I arrived, I saw Mr. Green standing in front of her house. He grabbed her hand and hugged her. How dare he? Anger took over me as I quickly ran over, pulled Susie away, and then to my surprise, I punched him in the face. I don't know who was more shocked, him or me. Ouch, my hand hurt. Before I could say anything, Susie shouted, "Dad, are you okay?" Dad? What was going on here? I froze and stared at them. Baron, what are you doing? You've got it all wrong, he's my dad. What? Mr. Green was Susie's dad? Well, she could have told me that earlier. We went inside and Susie got the first aid kit and patched up Mr. Green's nose and my hand. Then she told me the truth. Turns out her mom and Mr. Green used to date back in high school. But then her mom fell pregnant with Susie. He freaked out and refused to be part of their lives. So her mom moved away with her. But now they were back in town and Mr. Green was apologetic for how he behaved and wanted to be a father to her, but she was struggling to move on from the past and forgive him. Whoa, I couldn't believe I punched my crush's dad in the face. Talk about embarrassing. Although he looked more humiliated at the fact than me. A skinny boy with no athletic ability had actually made his nose bleed. That night I couldn't get a wink of sleep. Now Susie would never want to see me again, and Mr. Green would hate me even more. Ugh, it was a huge mess. After that, I tried to avoid Susie at school. As for Mr. Green, he stopped being so strict on me. Was he scared of Miss High Jump's punch now? Okay, I know, I shouldn't joke about this, but let me have a laugh. This man has just ruined his chance with the love of his life here. Then one day when I was tiredly walking back home, someone patted my shoulder. I turned back and saw Susie. To my surprise, she said, "Hey, you promised to walk me home. Are you breaking your word or something?" I stammered. I thought you hated me, so... She smiled and said that her dad didn't blame me either. In fact, thanks to my punch, they talked properly and now understood each other more. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Baron, thanks for always protecting me." Whoa, this day couldn't be better. The girl of my dreams didn't hate me, result. But I'm still scared to death of her dad. So basically, there are two missions that I need to complete. Firstly, I need to apologize to Mr. Green. And secondly, I need to improve my grade in PE class to impress him. The second mission sounds near on impossible, so wish me luck, as I'm gonna need it.
Hey, I'm Henry, and I'm a 23-year-old from Hamburg. And I have one question. You must have heard of K-pop, right? So, any K-pop fans in the house? Of course, I'm one. To be specific, I am an ARMY, a true BTS stan. Oh, and for those who don't know, stan is slang for when you're a big fan of something. Anyway, I can proudly say I'm obsessed with K-pop, and it's such a fun journey, right? But not everyone gets it. In fact, this is my story about how people treated me for being a fanboy, and it gets pretty dramatic. So, people always think that we like K-pop just because the idols are good-looking. But no, that's not only it. Seriously, I bet those who hate K-pop haven't even given it a proper listen. So you K-pop haters, just hear me out, and I'll start by tracing all the way back to the beginning of that life-changing moment when I first discovered K-pop. It all started when my classmate Chrissy was watching this music video called Dope during recess. I got curious and joined her. And oh boy, I never seen something so incredible before. The camera work, the choreography, it was unreal. I couldn't get the song out of my head, and the video was so much fun to watch. They didn't need hot girls nor supercars to make it eye-catching. It's pure talent only. After that, I started to listen to more K-pop and became a multi-stan, but BTS is always my one true love. I love them, and I wouldn't mind sharing all about it on my Instagram, which also helps me make friends with a lot of other ARMY from all around the world. Mostly girls, but a lot of guys too. And they often message me saying how much they admire me for being so open about my love for K-pop. They say they wish they had the same courage I did, since a lot of them got made fun of for liking Korean male artists. How ridiculous is that? It's 2021. We can like who we like, and we shouldn't have to keep quiet about our passions. However, I totally understood how they felt. I've been there, and it was rough. One time in high school, I'd been so excited to show Chrissy my new BTS album. We were screaming and squealing as I carefully flipped through each page as if it was my most prized possession, when some jock walked by with his crew and snatched it out of my hand. Then he said, "What is this, tween magazine? Didn't they all have plastic surgery, right?" Then another guy said, "Why do you like these guys? Are you gay or something?" Then they all walked off laughing. I was so angry I wanted to kick them so far off the earth, even Google wouldn't be able to find him. But I couldn't do anything. They were way bigger than me and would crush me into a pulp if I even tried. So I came up with a better idea. I started going to the gym. I wanted to be buff like Jungkook. Then I wouldn't be afraid of any losers picking on me and my boys anymore. Oh, and by the way, I'm not gay. That's just another thing us fanboys have to deal with. There's nothing wrong with being gay, but just assuming I am because I like K-pop is silly. K-pop is for anyone and everyone. Anyway, after high school, things were looking up as people in college were less nosy. We'd all grown up, and you won't believe how muscular I'd become. Girls started showing interest in me, but there was only one girl I had eyes for. Her name was Kayla, and she was so cute. However, there was just one tiny problem. And by tiny, I mean huge. She didn't like K-pop. Once when we were studying, she sat closer to me and asked with a smile, "What are you listening to?" Then she took one side of my earphones. "What is this? Some kind of chanting?" Then she just went back to reading with a disgusted look on her face. What? That was my bias. Rap Monster was spitting fire. I didn't know she was that tasteless, but I let it slide this time, since I didn't want to make a big deal out of it in the library. After that, things got worse, and her hatred for K-pop became more obvious. Every time I talked about it, she rolled her eyes and changed the subject. And when the new music videos came out, and I couldn't wait to show her, she'd just scroll on her phone and ignore it. Other than that, she was always so sweet, and so we kept on dating. But we shouldn't have. One time, we were hanging out at the mall, and it was a pretty special day for me as it was BTS's debut anniversary. I was so excited and had even worn my BTS crossbody bag with a Koya keychain to complete the look. I thought I looked cool, but Kayla burst out laughing when she saw me and said, "OMG, did you borrow your sister's bag or something?" I tried to explain to her and said, "No, it's mine, and this is my baby Koya." But she just cut me off and rolled her eyes, as she said we'd be late for the movies. She kinda killed my vibe, but it was BTS day, so I wouldn't let anything ruin it. We were lining up to buy popcorn when I felt someone tap me on the shoulder. "Excuse me, I couldn't help noticing your Koya. Are you perhaps an ARMY?" I finished his sentence with a scream. We were both excited. We basically talked in gibberish that probably only ARMY could understand. Turns out J-Hope was his bias, and his name was Craig. Then he even gifted me some photo cards he'd just printed out. I was so immersed in the conversation with him, I forgot Kayla was even there, until Craig said to her, "Oh, hey, who's your bias? I might have some cards for you too." Kayla looked offended and said, "You guys are sick. What a pair of losers. I've had enough of this K-pop stuff." Then she stormed off. We were left stunned, but oh well. If she couldn't respect my hobby and love me for who I am, then fine. Good riddance, Kayla. After that, Craig and I went to a cafe to talk everything BTS, and until this day, we're still good friends, and I'm grateful he saved me from dating that awful girl any longer. After that relationship, I gave my love life a bit of a break, as I was busy with streaming music videos, voting for BTS on award shows, and catching up with all of their content, on top of studying. I was perfectly happy living my little fanboy life without any girl, but then one day, everything changed. I was on the bus to class because I wasn't feeling well enough to drive after a white night watching BTS's live stream. I must have dozed off because the next moment I woke up and I was leaning on some girl's shoulder. I quickly apologized to her and she just giggled. Then I took a proper look and oh my gosh, I've never met such a beautiful girl in my life. She was like a mixture of all 4 members of Blackpink. Luckily, I was smart enough to ask her for her number and offered to buy her a drink to make up for almost drooling on her shoulder. After class, we met at a Starbucks and immediately hit it off. Her name was Clara, and she was so smart and pretty. I gotta make her mine. So I decided to change my tactic a little. I would wait a bit before telling her I was a fanboy. And instead, I focused on finding out more about her first and making it clear I really liked her. Then, when the right time came, I'd share with her my passion for K-pop. Pretty soon we got quite serious and did everything together, and I finally felt the moment had come. I was driving her home and decided to put my K-pop playlist on. To my surprise, she looked interested and asked what it was. I told her how much I loved it, and then nervously asked her, "Are you really okay with it?" Because usually when I tell people, they make fun of me. She just smiled and said, "Okay, now it's my turn." Then she put on some death metal, which almost made my hair stand on end. She laughed and said, "I know how you feel. Death metal isn't everyone's cup of tea either, but hey, we're allowed to like whatever we want, right? I respect that you love K-pop." Oh my gosh, could Clara be any more perfect? I can't wait to show her my room too. But unexpectedly, on the night I invited her over, her face changed as she saw all my posters and merch. I showed her my collections, my dolls, my pictures, but she just smiled and stared at me. Then she took my hand and said, "Henry, this is really cool, but don't you think it's a bit much? I know you love them, but you should maybe start spending your money on stuff for your future, too." Then she told me she wanted to go home. Can't deny that I was hurt, but I knew that she's the one for me, and she just needed a little time to really understand that this was more than just a hobby for me. So I was determined to get her to like K-pop. I started sending her songs and recommending her some Korean shows to watch. Once, I even pretended I was taking her out for a picnic, but I took her to an army fest. Clara went along with it all, but she didn't seem too interested. Then came the best news ever. I found out BTS was going to have a concert in London. I was desperate to go and told Clara about flying there for the concert, but she said, "Henry, isn't that the same day as our marketing contest? There will be headhunters there and everything. You can't miss it. This is your chance to secure a good job." I didn't care and replied with a joke, "But I've been waiting to see them my whole life. This is a dream come true. Who needs a job when you have BTS? I'm going to London, baby." But Clara didn't laugh. In fact, she got super angry and started shouting at me saying that I was so immature and that if I didn't grow up soon, she couldn't be with me anymore. She was even crying, saying she needed a responsible man who was thinking about his future as she stormed off. After that, she gave me the silent treatment. I was stuck in a dilemma. It was my biggest dream to see BTS live, but why did this feel so wrong? I decided to wait a few days to think it all through, and eventually I realized there would be other concerts, right? I really couldn't skip the contest. I mean, how else would I support BTS without money? I did need a job. So even though it broke my fanboy heart, I told Clara I'd skip the concert this time and go to the contest. Clara immediately grinned and said, "Really? I'm so proud of you, Henry." Then she gave me a big kiss, and I reminded myself this was all worth it. And at least I still had my girlfriend. But suddenly Clara started speaking again. "Henry, there's something I need to tell you. Actually, Professor Geller has told me that the contest has been put off temporarily. So this was just a test." Then she said she just wanted to see if I could figure out my priorities. She loved how passionate I was about K-pop, but everything needed balance, and she wanted to make sure I would take other parts of my life as seriously as I took K-pop. Then she handed me her phone and said, "Look." I couldn't believe it. It was 2 tickets to the BTS show. She'd bought them for me. I was so happy I burst into tears and couldn't stop hugging her. I thought that was the happiest moment of my life. But the BTS concert was, especially as Clara was by my side. We're currently still together, and guess what? She even biases Jin now. She's seriously the perfect girl for me, and I can't wait to spend my life with her. If in 2031 you ever see a family of 4 screaming their heads off at a BTS concert, chances are it's me and Clara and our future kids. Don't be shy. Come say hi.
I gripped onto the swing chains and stared down at my feet. Someone was walking over. It was Lydia. "What's up?" she asked as she sat on the swing next to me. "Hey." I managed a weak smile. "It's probably nothing. It's just, my parents have been arguing a lot. Then this morning, Mom smelled some unfamiliar perfume on Dad's shirt and accused him of cheating. Is he really having an affair?" Lydia rubbed my shoulder. "No way! Your dad probably just got caught in a spray mist cloud at the department store or something. You shouldn't jump to conclusions that quickly. Your dad loves your mom. Anyone can see that, so don't worry." I mumbled a yeah in agreement. My name's Cora, and as corny as it sounds, before this incident, I had been pretty satisfied with my life. I'm attending a renowned university. I get along really well with my parents, and despite being an only child, I've never felt lonely, as I have my best friend, Lydia, for company. She's more of a sister to me. Regardless of the problem, I just needed to drop her a message, then we'll meet at our spot, which is the swings at the park. Yep, I had it all, and I thought nothing would ever change that. It turns out that I was wrong. So it all began with my dad. He was acting oddly. He often looked at his phone, then smiled to himself. And then he'd take his phone into the bathroom and not come out for ages. This didn't go unnoticed by Mom, but when she asked him about it, he just shrugged and said that he had some problems with his digestion. Then, while Mom was doing the laundry, she smelt an unfamiliar perfume on his shirt. She marched over to him, threw the shirt at his head, and demanded that he explain himself. Dad denied it and said it was probably just his work colleague's perfume and that she was overreacting. That's why I arranged to meet Lydia at our spot. And as usual, she was so sweet and supportive. Lydia was right. Maybe I had thought too much. I came home and caught Mom crying in the kitchen. She looked at me with puffy eyes and said, "Something isn't right. I just know it. He doesn't look at me like he used to." I sat down, hugged her, and said, "Mom, let's stop overthinking. I trust Dad. He'll never betray us." I stayed to comfort her for a while. Then eventually she calmed down. The next evening, Dad came home with a big bouquet of blue roses, Mom's favorites. Then he cooked dinner for us both as an apology for making us sad. Mom looked touched, and she also apologized for misunderstanding him. I told myself that things would be okay now, right? For the next few weeks, Mom and Dad seemed to be fine. But then, on my mom's birthday, we invited Lydia and her mom Josie over for dinner. My mom was busy in the kitchen, so I took the birthday gift off of Josie for her. That's when I smelt it. Her perfume. It was the same scent that had been on Dad's shirt. I was sure of it. Over dinner, I noticed that Josie kept on looking over at my dad and laughed at all of his dumb jokes. Oh God, was my dad having an affair with my best friend's mom? I felt like I'd explode, but I couldn't say anything to Lydia, as I didn't want to upset her. So I'd do my best to avoid my best friend until I figured things out. This worked for a few days, but then one day after a class, she rushed over to me and said, "Cora, why are you avoiding me?" I pretended not to hear her and kept on walking, but she grabbed my arm and continued. "Did I do anything wrong? Will you please just tell me?" I spilled out, "I'm pretty sure that my dad's having an affair with your mom." At first, she looked shocked, but then she hugged me and kept on apologizing. It was all too much for me, and I burst into tears in her arms. She told me that she'd talk to her mom and find out what was going on. The next day, I met Lydia at our spot. She looked super awkward, then said, "It's true. My mom had a month-long affair with your dad, but she promised that it's over." My world came crashing down around me. I just couldn't believe it. Lydia hugged me and told me it'd be okay. I was so lucky to have such an awesome friend like her. We both decided it'd be best not to tell my mom. The affair was over, so why break my mom's heart now? I tried carrying on like normal, and for the next few weeks, it really felt like everything was okay. Dad was really sweet with Mom, and he even surprised her with a posh dinner out. But then, one afternoon, I saw Dad pacing the garden. He was on the phone with someone, and I heard him say, "Okay, I'm coming now." Then he got into his car and drove off. I decided to follow him, and it soon became clear where he was going. He pulled up in front of Josie's house and then walked straight inside without knocking. My heart sank. So he was still seeing her. Without a second thought, I called Mom and blurted out, "Mom, Dad's having an affair with Josie. I'm there now. Come and join me and we'll confront them together." 5 minutes later, my mom showed up. She looked both sad and furious. We went straight to the front door and banged on it, and I yelled out, "Open up! We both know about your dirty relationship!" But suddenly, someone spoke behind us. "Hey, Laura. Cora, is everything okay?" We turned around and saw Josie standing there with a grocery bag in her hand. I was about to tell Josie to stay away from my dad when Lydia opened the door and gave us confused looks. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, do you want your dad? He's fixing the dishwasher." Then Josie said, "Lydia, I told you to call a plumber out to fix it." "The plumber said he was fully booked today, so I think that I could ask Mr. Roberts for help," she replied. Oh no! So it turns out I'd misunderstood what was happening and messed everything up. Suddenly, my dad appeared in the doorway and said to us, "What's all this banging and shouting about?" "Right, we're all going home now to talk." As soon as we got home, Dad waved his arms about in anger, then yelled at Mom,
You're crazy, jealous, and unreasonable, and I can't be around you anymore.
I felt so bad. This was my fault, not Mom's. So I tried explaining this to Dad, but he just told me it wasn't my business and continued to shout at Mom. At first, Mom just sat there silently, but then she quietly said,
Is it any wonder I act how I do? I mean, you have been having an affair with my friend. Right. If you keep on being this ridiculous, then let's divorce.
Then he stormed off. It was horrible. Now Mom was inconsolable, and I felt awful for telling her. That night, I messaged Lydia to meet up, but she called me instead. She told me that she'd called my dad to ask him for the plumber's phone number, but he said that he'd come and fix it. She also said that Josie and him really were over. Then she hung up. This was kinda odd, but I suppose Lydia was finding it tricky being stuck in the middle of things with her mom and me. I guess I just needed to give her some space until things cooled down. After that, Mom and Dad barely said a word to each other. Talk about tense. Then, one day, Mom decided to move to my grandparents' for a few weeks, as she needed time to think everything through. I didn't blame her, but I didn't want to stay home alone with Dad, so I went and stayed with a college friend. One night, I came home to pick up some clean clothes when I saw it for myself. My dad was kissing her on the couch. I couldn't believe my eyes. He was such a liar. So I coughed to clear my voice, then said, "Oh, so it's over, is it?" They both looked up at me, and that's when my eyes met with hers. Only it wasn't Josie. Nope, it was Lydia. She stammered out, "Cora, why are you here?" What? Lydia? So my dad had been having an affair with Lydia? How could the girl who was always there for me through high school breakups, bad grade mishaps, and growing pains do this to me? Then Dad put his arm around her and told me everything, that he had never had any affair with Josie. It was Lydia all along, and that they were in love and wanted to get married. It was all too much for me, so I rushed out of there. Lydia ran after me and called out my name. Then when she caught up with me, she grabbed my arm. "Cora, wait, I want to explain. Your dad and I interrupted her. "Why lie? Why say it was your mom?" "I'm sorry. I just wasn't ready for everyone to find out then. So I sprayed my perfume on my mom and made up the story that she'd admitted to having an affair with him. As for the dishwasher thing, well, I set that up, as I knew you'd follow your dad and call your mom. I feel bad, but your mom needs to know. He doesn't love her. He loves me." I jerked my hand away and shouted, "You're such a liar! You don't deserve to be my friend, and you can't have him! He's with my mom!" Suddenly, she changed her attitude, smirked at me, and said, "Cora, let's accept the truth. Your dad is bored of your mom. Actually, I'll be your stepmother soon, my little daughter." Then she left. I had jello legs, and I was so overwhelmed that it made me feel dizzy, so I sat on the curb and tried to calm myself down. Then I called Mom and told her everything. She cried a lot, but she thanked me for telling her the truth. After that, Mom came home and told Dad she wanted a divorce. Then she demanded that he move out. This was 6 months ago, and it's been hard, but Mom and I are getting there. I haven't spoke to Dad or Lydia since, although I've heard that they're living together. I know I can't avoid them forever, but I just don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them. For now, I'm staying strong for Mom and helping her through this. Then maybe one day in the future, if they contact me, I'll be ready to meet them, and maybe, eventually, find it in myself to let them back into my life. Hi again, it's Amelia here. In the first part of my story, I had a horrible encounter with a rude guy in the restaurant I worked in. I hoped I'd never have to meet that kind of awful person ever again. But life doesn't work like that, does it? And ironically, I bumped into him around a month after that, and he saved my life. Then I ended up paying him back by letting him move in with me as he was homeless. And after a few days, I just had enough of his excuses of not being able to find a job. so I told him he could come work in the restaurant with me. I introduced him to my manager, and because he's quite a bright-looking guy, he immediately got the job. However, it wasn't all plain sailing. I mean, what's with his laziness and clumsiness? He was a walking disaster. He broke so many dishes within his first few shifts only, he'd be lucky if he even got any salary. And that's not all. He shouted at a kid who dropped an ice cream on the floor he'd just cleaned. Obviously, the kid burst out crying, which made Jude even angrier. You can just imagine how much our manager had to apologize to both the kid and his mom. And after that, she was furious with Jude and threatened to fire him, all in his first week. Meanwhile, things at home weren't much better. He didn't lift a finger. The place was such a mess. And one time I asked him to do some laundry while I went out to pick up some groceries. Well, I came home to find the laundry room covered in bubbles. And there he was, standing in the middle of that mess, confusingly pushing all the buttons possible to make it stop. He had basically poured the whole bottle of detergent in there. I couldn't believe it. He was useless, and he kept breaking things. I actually had to keep a list of it all, so that when he got his salary, he could pay me back. He was a nightmare. And yet, even though he was lazy and messy, that didn't stop him spending hours on his hair. I kid you not, I've watched him fix his hair for about 90 minutes once, and I swear, it still looked the same. Not to mention, one time I accidentally walked in on him singing in the bathroom while stroking his hair. All he was wearing was a little towel, and we both got such a fright we screamed, and I ran out of there in embarrassment. I came close to kicking him out so many times. He drove me crazy. Honestly, one night I was working late, so I asked if he could prepare dinner. Just a simple pasta. I mean, how hard could that be, right? Well, it was mission impossible for Jude. He burnt the pasta. Burnt it! How does one burn pasta? There were bowls and pans everywhere. When I started shouting at him, he just laughed and shoved me a dish of burnt noodles and said, "Oh, come on, Amelia. I'm a chef. It's art. Now please, enjoy my signature dish, the smoky charcoal pasta." I could have killed this guy, but lucky for him, his humor has saved him this time. So instead, I decided to teach him how to cook. And fortunately, he was actually a pretty decent chef, and he enjoyed it. One night I came home, and he'd made a Thai green curry. It unexpectedly looked quite nice. Still, I was nervous to try it. But OMG, it was delicious. He proudly told me how the chef at the restaurant had given him the recipe along with some cooking tips. That's great. And even though the kitchen was a total mess, it was a start. So I decided he could cook from then on, and then I'd do the washing up. Pretty soon, his 1 month was up. I told him it was time to move out, but he begged me to let him stay longer, as he'd barely got any salary from the restaurant due to owing so much from all the broken dishes. I wanted to say no, but if I was honest with myself, it had been quite lonely living by myself, and even though he was a total klutz, I kinda enjoyed having some company. Plus, he was a top chef. I pretended to be thinking about it for a sec, and then said, "Okay, fine, but you've got 1 more month. Then you're out." He was super happy, thanking me non-stop while running to the kitchen, saying he'd cook me a special dinner in return. Just like that, we learned to get along better with each other, as we lived and worked together. And, well, time flew, and soon another month had gone by, and yet neither of us even brought it up. So he kept on staying. Then one day, while Jude and I were working, a group of stuck-up girls came in. One of them suddenly said, "Guys, look, isn't that our Prince Jude? Why is he working here like a loser?" Then they all burst out laughing. This made me angry, and I was about to go over and say something when I realized that the girl who'd spoken was Jude's ex. I knew Jude had heard, and I thought he'd get annoyed, but he just ignored her and kept working. But the girls kept on laughing, and it was seriously annoying. I went over to take their order, but Jude's ex refused to be served by me. She kept asking for Jude to take their order, and when I said he was busy, she demanded to see our manager. Eventually, he went to serve them, but his ex kept on harassing him. She even dropped water all over the floor so that he'd have to come and clean it up. I offered to do it for him, but he wouldn't let me. And then it got worse. As they were leaving, that girl dropped a $10 tip on the floor. I was furious. What a spoiled brat. I thought Jude would leave it, but he calmly sat down to pick it up while the group of girls all burst out laughing as they walked out of the restaurant. I ran over to comfort Jude, but he just smiled and said, "Hey, I have $10. What do you want for dinner? My treat." Then he went back to work, but every time I looked over at him, I could see he was hurt. I really wanted to yell at his ex. How rude can a person get? Later that night at dinner, we spoke about everything that had happened that day. I told him he shouldn't feel sad about his ex, because she was rude and never deserved him in the first place. But then he just laughed it off and said that it wasn't that gold digger that he was bothered by, but actually because it reminded him of his old attitude and the ways he used to treat people, including me on that first day we'd met. Then he sighed and said, "I bet if I'd been a better person, a decent son, then my parents wouldn't have kicked me out that heartlessly, even when I wasn't their actual son." Suddenly I felt so sorry for him, but I didn't know what to say to make it better. But to be fair, looking back at the person he was back then when we first met versus now, he was like a totally different guy. He had been doing a great job at work, and all our colleagues loved him. One day, a kid dropped her ice cream, and I stared in shock, waiting for Jude to freak out. But instead, he went over and asked if she was okay, and if she'd like another ice cream. I couldn't believe it. He was so sweet to her. I couldn't stop myself from smiling at him. He'd seriously changed. And even though it pains me to admit, he's a very good-looking guy. So naturally, he got a lot of attention. In fact, a lot of girls came to the restaurant just to be served by him. They even openly flirted with him, and he surely loved it. I just rolled my eyes, wishing I didn't have to see that. There was one girl in particular who came to the restaurant almost every day. She was super pretty, and obviously was trying to get his attention. I noticed one shift that Jude was kind of flirting back. How irritating. I guess he hadn't changed that much then. Then one day, I saw her hand him a piece of paper. When he came back to the counter, he was grinning and said to me, "Looks like I've got a date tonight." I was so annoyed and said, "It's not okay to flirt with the customers. I'll tell our manager." Then I stormed off. Later that afternoon, he clocked out first without telling me, and when I got home from work, I saw him being all dressed up for his date, which made me feel so grumpy for no reason. He was whistling and sounded so happy. Then as he walked out the door, he said, "Don't wait up for me. It might be a late one." Ugh, he was driving me nuts. I told him he had to be home by 10 p.m. or I'd lock him out. He laughed and said, "Are you joking? You're giving me a curfew? Geez, Amelia, if I didn't know better, I'd think you were jealous or something." Ew, I wasn't jealous, and I told him that. Who did he think he was? As if I'd ever be jealous of that girl. No chance. And yet, I couldn't sleep that night. I kept tossing and turning, and thinking about Jude and that pretty girl. Eventually, I got up and decided to go for a walk. Maybe I just needed some fresh air. But as I walked into the park, there he was. But the girl was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he was sitting on a bench surrounded by stray cats. I walked towards him, and he was as surprised to see me as I was to see him. I asked him why he wasn't out on his hot date, and he said, "Oh, the date went well, but I decided to come sleep in the park because I missed your curfew." That made me feel so guilty. I was about to justify myself. Then he winked and said, "Just kidding. Actually, the date was boring. I did come to the bar and hung out with her for a bit, but I strangely felt out of place, so I made up an excuse to leave. I didn't want to come home too early, though, in case you'd laugh in my face, so here I am. I don't know. I think I'm kinda over dating and stuff." Wait, am I hearing it wrong? Our playboy chooses to go play with stray cats instead of hanging out with hot girls in fancy bars? Are you really, Jude? I playfully rubbed his head while teasing him. Can't deny, but I actually felt so relieved hearing him say that the date didn't go well and that nothing happened between him and that girl. In fact, I was strangely happy. But what does that mean? Do you wonder if Jude ever actually moved out? Stay tuned for the final part of my story. You wouldn't want to miss it.
Family. They're complicated. Right. I used to think my family was happy as can be. Nope. Just like when a water balloon gets too big and then explodes, Mom and Dad split up just after one big, fat, dumb fight. After that, my dad moved out. Me and my little sis Katie were given a hard choice. One of us would stay here with Mom, and the other would go live with Dad and his new girlfriend, Zara. Katie's really sweet, kind, and sensitive, so I didn't think uprooting her life and making her live with some new stepmommy would be a good idea. I'm a big bro. Protecting my little sis is what I do best. So when it was settled, Katie stayed with Mom, and I moved in with Dad and Zara. Fast forward a few months, and Mom fell in love with some dude named Glenn and married him. I wasn't sure about Glenn. I'd only met him a couple of times, but he seemed too smug for my liking. Anyway, back to Dad's, it turns out my life with them was a breeze. They let me go out when I wanted, barely made me do any house chores. Instead, Zara was not a mean person. She treated me like family. And for my 16th birthday, she even suggested my dad to surprise me with my very own car. Happy days. But there was one snag. From my sis's messages, I sensed things weren't quite so rosy with her. So I went around to show her my new car. Well, really this was just an excuse to go and check things out. I strolled into the house to find Katie emptying the dishwasher. She was crying. I mean, I know house chores suck, but they weren't bad enough to bring someone to tears. Something was up. I made her a drink, and we both sat down and talked. She told me that it was Glenn. He didn't like her and kept getting her into trouble. Katie said, "He always considered me as a thorn in his eyes because he wanted Mom to spend full time with him. He demanded that I do all the house chores, and then when Mom got home from work, he'd say he did them. If I tried to question him on this, he'd get me into trouble by telling lies to Mom about me. Such as one time he said I cursed at him and stole $20 from his wallet." I didn't like the sound of this, so I asked her, "Have you tried telling Mom what's going on?" She nodded her head and blubbed out, "Yes, she says I'm just lazy and jealous." I replied, "Sounds like Mom's blinded by love. Don't worry, sis, she'll come around and see sense soon." She sniffed back tears and said, "I hope so, Rory, as things really suck here." I told her to let me know the next time Glenn did anything sneaky. Whoa, turns out this guy likes to play dirty. A few days later, he switched the cooking oil for whiskey, so when Mom started the cooking, the whole thing went up in flames. Then Glenn rushed to the rescue and blamed Katie, saying he'd seen her holding the whiskey bottle last night, but presumed she was just trying to sneak some. Then he told Mom that Katie had insisted he cook her steak, so the prank must have been meant for him. Mom instantly believed him over Katie, and punished her by making her miss her school dance and having to do house chores instead. Poor Katie, she was so upset. But then a week later, sneaky Glenn struck again. This time Katie saw him switching Mom's diet mayo for the full-fat stuff. Katie rushed to get Mom to catch him red-handed, but when she arrived, she saw him spreading diet mayo in her bagel. Mom shouted at Katie for saying untrue things about her stepdad and grounded her again. This sucked. My sis was the sweetest girl, and she doesn't deserve this. Not to mention the fact that some of these pranks sound dangerous. Well, not so much the mayo one, but the fire one could have ended so badly. This Glenn dude needed to stop with the games, and it was about time I showed him that no one messes with my little sis. So I suggested we switch things up for a couple weeks. Katie would go and live with Dad and get to know Zara, and I'd go and live with Mom and get to know Glenn. It's clear Glenn knew he couldn't mess with me, so for the first week he stayed out of my way. I used this time to refuel, relax, enjoy Mom's cooking, and plot my revenge. When the second week arrived, I was ready to make Glenn's life a misery. Tough lucky, Glenny boy. Mom was working extra hard as Glenn had lost his job. So, being the good son I am, I drove her to the grocery store. Mom was so happy with my help, and she promised to make my favorite omelet. When we got home, Mom called Glenn to come and help carry the bags inside. He tried to impress her by carrying them all at once, but one of them split open and groceries went everywhere, including the box of eggs. Oops! Mom was furious and shouted at him. That's what you get for trying to show off and be a strong man. Now I can't have an omelet for my dinner, and I was looking forward to that. Haha, seeing his dumbfounded expression was so funny. Yep, I cut a hole into the bottom of the bag so that would happen. I wasn't finished with him yet, no chance. So in the next few days, when Mom left super early for work, I poured cornflakes everywhere, threw dirty laundry onto the floor, put the dog bowl on top of the couch, and stomped around in my dirty sneakers. I even took the breakfast Mom had prepared for Glenn to school with me, so I knew he'd wake up hungry, then spent all day having to tidy up my mess. Ha! Naturally, Glenn wasn't happy with me, so when I got back from school, he forced me to mow the lawn. This guy looked so tired spending the entire day clearing out my stuff, so fine by me. As when Mom came home and saw me, I gasped for breath and said, I had a busy day with schoolwork, but Glenn still made me do all the chores. I'm so tired, Mom. Mom rushed inside and found Glenn watching cartoons. Then she yelled at him, You're home all day, so why don't you mow the lawn instead of making my son do it? I had to go to work. My boy had to do the chores. So what exactly is your role in this house? Glenn was speechless. It didn't end there, as Mom was so mad she made him sleep on the couch. Glenn avoided me after this, but that wasn't enough. I had to make sure that he'd leave my sis alone. I needed to make Glenn realize that his jerky ways were wrong. I knew Mom and Glenn had a piggy bank in their room for their future kid fund. So when they weren't around, I snuck into their room, smashed open the piggy bank, and hid the money in Glenn's jacket. That night after dinner, I asked Mom if I could borrow her headphones. So she went into her room to grab them. Just then, Glenn grabbed his jacket and was about to go somewhere. The moment he stepped out the door, we heard a frantic scream upstairs. It was my mom. She must have found the broken piggy bank and ran downstairs yelling at Glenn. He stood in the doorway confused, but then she checked his pockets and voila! There was the money. She angrily waved it in front of his face. What's this, huh? You're gonna go out spending the savings for our kid, right? You're making no money, so stop ruining everything. They took their argument outside, and I went up to my room and watched through the window. Suddenly, a car pulled up, and out stepped this well-dressed girl. Oh, wow, it was Katie. She ran over to Mom and hugged her. Then, Dad and Zara appeared. Turns out Katie had had a great time at Dad's. Zara had always wanted a daughter, so when Katie came, she was so happy and had taken her shopping, got her hair done, and spoiled her. When Mom looked at her own daughter having a better life with her stepmom, I was pretty sure she realized how bad she was. I could see her ashamed face. I rushed downstairs and greeted my sis. Then I turned to Mom and said, Mom, you should care for Katie more. You see, Glenn even treated me badly. You don't know how hard he was with her. We love you, so please trust Katie like you trust me. Then I turned to Glenn. You're her husband, but it doesn't mean you can replace us in our mom's heart. Mommies always love their children best. Don't be childish and try to separate them or I'll come back. I winked at him. Yeah, okay, he grunted. Then he turned to Katie and said, I'm sorry, Katie. What do you say to us starting again? Katie smiled sweetly and said, okay, I'd like that. It looks like I'd save the day. Now Glenn knew that if he ever messed with Katie again, then I'd be back. After that, Mom still made Glenn do all the chores, but Katie, being the sweet girl that she is, helped him out with them. As for me, I went back to life at Dad's. I went around there more often to check on Katie and give Mom a lift to the grocery store. And Katie even came around for barbecues and to have a girly pamper session with Zara. So in the end, everything worked out, and now we're one big, crazy, dysfunctional family. But hey, as long as everyone's happy and doesn't try to mess with my little sis, then it's all good with me.